in Havana, Cuba, you may remember a Cuban bus driver broke through the gate of the Peruvian embassy and sought asylum. And when that happened, literally thousands of other Cubans ran onto the grounds of the Peruvian embassy to join them, to seek on this little patch of Peruvian ground a freedom they'd long dreamed of. This, of course, was an offense to the local authorities, but Ambassador Pinto held his ground, even though in the course of the next weeks, he received several visits during the night from a black car with Fidel Castro there, and he refused to give his ground. And eventually he told the president of Cuba, look, you want these people back, I'm not giving them back. They're Cubans, they're not Peruvians, but they're on our land. But I'll tell you what, I can help you solve your problem. And that solution was the Mariel boat lift, which lifted 125,000 Cubans to what they considered to be a life of freedom. It was an act of courage, of individual initiative. It was an extraordinary thing to do. Ambassador Pinto is nominated by several people. He is a writer and about human rights. He is nominated by a Mexican group of journalists, by a Peruvian institute. But we greatly admire his work, and we would ask him to come forward and accept this award. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was 32 years old, and when I make the decision without instruction from my government, with own risk, I'm very happy to solve this problem for too much people in Cuba, not only for Cuba, but also for the countries for this side, for Europe. Now, I have two sons. They are diplomats, and they're the same age, 32, 31 years old. I hope just this prize gives my sons also the motive to do the same. Sometimes this is necessary.
May I please present to you now a diplomat, coincidentally from Canada, Mr. Ben Rouswell. Ben Rouswell's diplomatic life, which hasn't been very long because he's quite young, was highlighted in Cairo by his role in relating to dissidents and people in civil society. And I see back there my friend Saad Ibrahim, who will remember Ben from those days when you were almost alone in public opposition. Since then, he has had numerous jobs, including being deputy head of our mission in Iraq. He was deputy head of our mission in Kabul in Afghanistan, and the political officer in the somewhat dangerous circumstances of Kandahar in Afghanistan. But what he did there was try to make people believe that actually it was about democracy, and that to be in a democratic country, you have to fight corruption. And he fought corruption, and he fought officials and authorities in his own government who were not so willing to confront authorities over the need to show transparency and democracy in fact as well just as in name. Ben has now continued his work on democracy. He's currently at Stanford University conducting a democracy technology project, and I'd invite him to come forward and accept this award for this outstanding work.
Thank Thank you, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, for this honor. I think it sends an important message that diplomats also have a role to play in democracy struggles. In the 21st century, our countries are so closely intertwined that we can no longer pretend not to have some influence in one another's politics. In countries undergoing state building, where I most recently served in Afghanistan, we take on some important roles of the state itself. And so diplomats can't ignore domestic politics because they are part of it. I believe that we need to be guided so that our influence is used for and not against democracy. And I would propose that we be guided by sovereignty, not only because it's the bulwark of the international system, but also an important guarantor of freedom. But we should also work to make sure that that sovereignty is shared by the people. I believe that our goal should be popular sovereignty, and that we should be loyal not only to the governments of the countries where we are posted, but to the people as well. Thank you very much.
This is a story that those of us who know Cuba well, with great affection for Cuba, appreciate. Cecilia Weigers is a Dutch diplomat, not the ambassador at the time. She was in Cuba a few years ago. She was everywhere. She was everywhere with people, just with people. She was nominated by the Central Latin American human rights group, CADAL, for her work principally in making sure that Cubans, individual Cubans, the free library movement, individual houses, in one case, a rather clandestine group of gay Cubans, had access to literature, to books, to things that in a society which is not free simply aren't available. She is remembered in Cuba because she and her embassy enabled bloggers to blog. If you know Cuba, you know the great blog called Generation Y, which started actually with Cecilia Weigers' help. It is a blog now that is so successful and well known from Cuba that nobody can do anything to bring it down. She has done what diplomats do best, which is under the radar, to be out there helping people. You have heard perhaps of the Damas de Bianco, the wives of those journalists who were jailed in 2003 to enormously long terms, whom she went accompanied to Mass every Sunday, whom she counseled and comforted. She did private work, but private work in this case for civil society often is the best work, and we congratulate you for everything that you have done.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the Council for a Community of Democracies, and thank you also for CADAL for the nomination. Today I'm proud to receive this prize. I do believe as a diplomat we are as a guest in the country where we serve. And that means that we have to respect the margins in which we can work. That means also there are limits in what we can do to promote democracy and human rights. I also would like to thank my ministry, who always gave me full-fledged support, and also my predecessors who did wonderful work before me. But I think what was most important for me in the field was to feel the encouragement of the people of Cuba itself. And I'm talking not only about political activists, but also about mothers of political prisoners, about courageous bloggers who try to seek a place in the world and also to find access to information. And I believe it's a good thing that the Palmer Prize seeks attention for these fundamental rights, like freedom of expression, access to information, but also the duty of diplomats to uphold those rights. So thank you for this prize. Big honor.
I have no more pieces of paper. But I have two invisible individuals that we would like to acknowledge. And those are one who is of this house, of this place, Ambassador Paviljonis, who we gave an award to privately for, he's, as you know, the Lithuanian ambassador to the United States, and he was the coordinator of the Lithuanian chairmanship of the Community of Democracies at its inception a year and a half ago, when I and my colleagues came here, and we, together with his colleagues at the ministry and the minister himself, mapped out some ideas for what the Community of Democracies might achieve during the chairmanship of Lithuania. And we were very honored to hear from him just before we left for Vilnius that what we had aspired to, what we dreamed to achieve, had been done. And this ministerial crowns that achievement. So I want to honor Ambassador Paviljonis for being a friend to civil society everywhere. He's included us all in decision-making processes and in consultations throughout the year and a half. And I think that's a very special model for diplomats. The other individual we would like to recognize we'd like to recognize is Ambassador Aja Malhotra. For reasons of the regulations of the Indian diplomatic service, we cannot give him an award as an outside organization, but we want to at least acknowledge the fact of his really quite remarkable work. He was former Deputy Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations and was pivotal in developing the United Nations Democracy Fund, which is now awarded grants to hundreds of civil society organizations. I may be understating it. He was a strong proponent of funding local civil society groups whenever possible, because prior to his assumption of that responsibility, a lot of that money went to governmental organizations. So we honor Ambassador Malhotra in his absence. Thank you, and that concludes our